welcome to another installment in my video series all about how I'm trying to conquer my fear of flying through the use of virtual reality and flight simulators. In this installment, I'm going to walk you through in real time an experience that doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen can be quite unsettling, which is the go-around. For various reasons, when either a pilot cannot land as intended at first when they're on their final approach into the airport in order to land, they have a very well researched and very well documented procedure, very well practiced procedure that they do to do what's called a go-around or a missed approach. So what we're doing right now is we're sort of at the end of a flight. We're coming into Seattle. I'm sitting here as a passenger. In fact, you can see out of the clouds popping out of there, you can see Mount Rainier out there in the distance. And we're making our way towards our final approach into Seattle Airport, Seattle Tacoma Airport. So what's going to happen here is you're going to see see and hear some different noises that are associated with the plane landing. Right now, the engines are spooling down. They're providing a little bit less thrust because we're slowing the plane down, and we're descending in altitude. Outside, you can see we're going through a cloud layer, so you can no longer see anything, and on a real flight, that may be a little bit disconcerting, especially because sometimes going through clouds is associated with a little bit of turbulence, a few bumps. But nothing to be concerned about, and the airplane is perfectly capable, both via manual control in an emergency or in usual operation in autopilot, of landing the plane and flying through clouds or any kind of weather or any situations like that. So, as you can see right now, we're making a little bit of a steep turn, probably steeper than it would be in real life, but there are a few things that, well, because I'm not a great pilot, and also because of just how the simulator's set up, maybe a little bit unrealistic, a little bit more extreme than they would be in real life. The idea here is more just to give you a general idea, as opposed to simulate every single technical detail of an actual flight, which for that I'll leave to the more experienced flight simulator pilots or real-life pilots. But in any case, we're making our final approach here into Seattle, and what's going to happen is we're going to get very close, we're going to slow down, we're going to get close to the runway, but instead of landing, actually very soon before we land, we are going to speed up again and take off. So you'll see that here in a few minutes after we make our final approach into the airport. And that can happen, like I say, for a variety of reasons. If the pilot in charge feels like the landing is, we're coming in too steep or too fast, if there's some sort of an issue with that, if there's a technical issue that they want to be sure of, it can range from, I really couldn't speak to exactly all the technical issues that can happen, but it is a fairly routine, at least thing that people practice in the aviation industry, which is the go-around. Sometimes it can happen also if for some reason, right there you can hear the noises of the flaps coming down. And as you can see, we're descending a little bit more. You can see Seattle, the outskirts of Seattle down there. Another reason, as I was saying before, for the go-around would be maybe some sort of obstacle on the runway itself, a plane that hasn't cleared off in time, vehicle, anything like that might cause an aborted landing. Weather can also be a factor, in particularly bad weather. If visibility is particularly poor and the plane, for whatever reason, isn't rated to land in those visible conditions at a certain point. This is less common on commercial flights, but on private planes, things like that, at a certain point, the pilot might have to declare a missed approach and try again, either at the same airport or at an alternate airport that they've chosen and carefully selected in advance. for just that type of contingency. So one thing to remember about flights, even if something out of the ordinary happens, aviation has been around for so long, and the airline industry, pilots themselves take this very seriously and have contingencies for pretty much every event that you can imagine during a normal flight operations, or in the case of today, slightly abnormal, but not totally unprecedented. So we're going to continue to see our landing here. Have a little bit of turbulence, but nothing too bad. And what you hear there is, I believe, those are the landing gear going down. As we get a little bit closer in, you can see the spoilers, the speed brakes are up, and the flaps have gone down. That might have been another notch of flaps actually, but because of that increased wind resistance that you're hearing now, it makes me think that maybe that was the landing gear. Right now we're close enough and we're landing, we're doing a certain type of autopilot assisted landing, landing with a instrument system that determines sort of the angle that we descend and the sort of left and right horizontal track that we're on. So we're aimed pretty much directly at the runway and descending at a standard rate, at a standard speed, and all of the things that happen aboard the plane, all the noises and mechanical and electronic events are fairly standardized. So probably flaps that was actually, if we're still going down here. So for me on a real flight, this is a moment of heightened anxiety, but it's also mixed with a little bit of relief because we're close to the ground and we're close to the flight being over. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll use of my breathing techniques to calm down, and for me personally, one way I deal with claustrophobia and one way I deal with fear of flying is to be on a window seat. So I'll take the opportunity to look outside and occupy my mind by trying to spot landmarks or different sites. Of course, that doesn't work if it's cloudy or if it's nighttime, so it's not something I rely on solely, but it's one of the many tools I use to try to keep myself calm. And we're just descending a little bit more, getting closer to land, as you can see. You can hear the aircraft slowing down a little bit, hear the engines throttling down a little bit. You may from time to time notice a little bit jittering or some screen effects that are a little bit jarring or unsettling, so just to keep that in mind, 9 times out of 10 that's the result of the simulator and the computer that I'm running this on, and not anything that I'm trying to demonstrate as a real flight. And that's definitely the landing gear that you're hearing now, having gone down and creating a lot of wind resistance. For me, with my headphones on, it's even hard to hear myself talk right now over the sound of the landing gear, and that's also true for a real flight. I think it gets fairly loud at this stage. So especially if you're sitting close to the landing gear. If you're sitting close to the landing gear, you may feel actually more mechanical effects in your seat itself. The vibration of the landing gear descending, or some sort of clicks and that kind of thing, and that's very normal to hear. So remember, as we get close, once we get to a certain distance, almost landing, we're going to do the go-around, practice the go-around. So this landing is going to get aborted, and the engines will throttle up fairly significantly. The landing gear and flaps will go back up, and it'll be as if we're taking off again. Usually what happens at that stage is coordinated. Almost all the time it's coordinated with air traffic control. And there's fixed and designated points that are part of the pre-approved flight plan. In case that kind of thing is necessary, the plane will go to a pre-approved spot and possibly circle around until it can get further instructions from the air traffic control. In the case of this flight, to save time, I'm not doing it exactly by the book. I more wanted to show what the actual feeling of not landing and going around is like. So please bear that in mind. It's not exactly how it'll turn out, but the general idea is there. As is often the case in these types of flights, you cannot see the airport in front of you as you're landing, so a lot of times for me, my brain starts to think, oh my gosh, are we even close to the airport? We're so low. And then you get to a certain point, like right about here, where you can start to see the landing or the airport structures and maybe some of the runways. So here we are, getting close to Seattle Airport. Fortunately, in this case, we almost landed, but we're unable to land. So immediately we notice as we start taking off again. And for people who aren't afraid of flying, this can be unsettling. For people who do have a fear of flying, this can be very disquieting, this type of thing, both circling around an airport or the actual go-around. It's important to remember that there are well-established procedures, and while it may be something that is out of the ordinary and isn't, quote-unquote, exactly how the flight should go, the pilots are well-trained for this type of eventuality, and it gets resolved with minimal difficulty and just adds a little bit of time onto the flight. Right now you can hear the flaps coming back up. That's to assist in the takeoff and the gaining altitude a little bit. And as you can also see, we're starting to get a little bit higher. The plane is angled a little bit higher up. Now, I will give you fair warning in advance. At this stage in the flight, when I was actually flying it, I took a lot of manual control. As I said, I did not fly it according to the actual procedures. So it may be a little bit on the sporty side in terms of our turns and our maneuvers here, but I'm trying to give you the idea more just about how the overall idea of almost landing, having to break off that landing, circling around, and then actually landing would go. So as you can see, we've got a little bit of banking here to change different headings. At times the air traffic control might assign a heading that is necessitates the plane to move out of the way of another incoming traffic or outgoing traffic, or just be in a pre-designated spot to circle around a bit to find a landing berth. And this is all well coordinated between air traffic control and the pilots themselves, and all a very normal part of airline operation. So as I mentioned, there may be a little bit of maneuvering that's non-standard. That much of a downward bank is probably more due to my piloting skill than anything else, but it does give us the opportunity to see very, very far in the distance downtown Seattle, some of the skyscrapers down in the distance, and maybe if you've got a really good eye, better than me, you can see the Space Needle down there. So what we're doing now in the simulator is we're just basically making a big circle, continuing on from our heading past the runway, and then we're just going to make left turns until we get back on a heading to the runway. So just doing a big circle around until we're on that same flight path for landing that we were on before. In a real-world scenario, the plane might be diverted to a predefined location. My location, I usually means a location in the sky, not necessarily a real location, but a GPS coordinate or a radio frequency coordinate that is predetermined. And what they'll do is they'll use that as a navigational point to circle around, and they can circle, as many times as needed around that point. It's sort of like it's called a holding pattern. It's a way to coordinate the plane, a way to coordinate ATC, air traffic control, and sort of it's a standard operation both for commercial and for passenger private flying. In our case, we don't have to worry about other planes in the sky or air traffic control, so we're just going directly back to the airport. And as you can see, we're turning a little bit there to the left, probably parallel to the airport right now, and because we're turning, you can sort of see more of that sky view on our side, and a real plane, it would probably be accompanied by the sensation of actually turning, which can be upsetting and disquieting sometimes. It's important to remember that that's all part of a normal plane's operation, and although this is a very big plane, it operates on the same principles that any other plane does. It wants to stay in the sky. It's designed in a way that it's able to glide. It's not going to fall right out of the sky. So as we continue on our flight here, we have a little bit more turns to go. I believe that now we're going to be going parallel to the airport, if I'm understanding right, if I'm remembering right. And the idea here is, let's say we had to abort the landing because there was a aircraft on the runway, on the tarmac, that wasn't supposed to be there. So we abort the landing, we take off again, circle around, everybody clears things up, air traffic control gives us the instructions that we need to get back. Those are pre-programmed or easily programmed into the autopilot. Usually the autopilot takes care of most of the flying at this stage, or if necessary, the pilots are perfectly capable of flying the plane manually as well. And based on the instructions that air traffic control gives them, they'll return back either to the same runway that they were attempting to land on before or another suitable runway. In extreme cases, if there's a reason why that airport isn't suitable anymore, they'll divert to another pre-approved airport that's capable of handling their traffic. I don't really know too much about the procedures there, but I assume it's similar to how it is in private flying, that there's an alternate airport that's part of the flight plan. You can see we've started a little bit of a descent again as we are getting close to completing our circuit back towards the airport. Now, the second thing that we're going to observe is a little bit of a inadvertent mistake on my part, but a nonetheless interesting secondary lesson that we can take, which is on this second landing, it's going to be a little bit of a harder landing, less of a glide as we're used to. But I think it's probably instructional to show the aerodynamics of the plane and the fact that really, this plane is capable of doing a lot more. And usually airlines and pilots fly it very gently for obvious reasons. Nobody wants to have an uncomfortable flight, but it is very safe to fly it, more agilely, more sportily, if you want to say it that way. And I guess why I say that is because it gives me some comfort, because a lot of times if something unexpected happens on a flight that I'm on, in terms of, we turn and the angle that we're turning at is more steep than I'm used to, or more steep than it's been on the earlier part of the flight, I start to get nervous that maybe the plane can't handle it. Well, the plane can handle it. There are tolerances for sure, like any machine, like anything in life, really. There are some tolerances, and of course they don't want to exceed that. But in normal flight operations, the plane is operating well below those tolerances. And so things that may feel like, okay, maybe this is a steeper banking turn than we're used to, is not anything to be concerned about. As you can see, we're descending again, getting ready to make our second attempt at a landing here at Seattle Tacoma Airport. You can hear the engine sort of throttling down quite a bit, trying to descend and lose some speed. Now, I'll say it one more time. This is going to be a more sporty landing, so just prepare yourself if you're watching this to be calm. Just remember that this is a demonstration and not how an actual flight will go. But we'll have a little bit more maneuverability than I'm used to doing. But I think it's instructional to understand that even if a plane has to maneuver a little bit more, it is still very safe and very aerodynamic. At this stage in the flight, for sure, we would probably be not allowed to have Wi-Fi operation, I believe, but I would imagine that the screens in front of us would still be active. You could be watching something or listening to some sort of music to distract yourself. Reading, of course, is always a possibility. And you would probably be hearing the noises of passengers or noises of flaps going down as we're hearing right now. as you can see, there's our view of Mount Rainier again, coming into view. A little glitch there in the airplane. It's just more of a result of the sim than anything else, but once we get that back on track, we'll be back on the course for landing. And you can hear some more wind resistance as the plane does a little bit more work to slow down there. And now, as I say, there's a little bit more maneuverability. We're just moving around a little bit more as the pilots are manually landing the plane. We're also in a little bit of a steeper descent than we normally would be, or actually flying lower than we would normally be flying. But again, as I say, just an opportunity to understand a little bit the aerodynamics of the plane and become familiar with the idea that you know, even if it's something a little bit out of the ordinary, it doesn't mean that it's unsafe. And as we get closer to the airport, you can see the beautiful mountains in the background there, and just sort of take in some of the sights a little bit. Relax, knowing that we'll be safely on the ground very shortly now. And as you can see, we're close to landing again, and here we go, about to touch down. There we have a little bit harder of a touchdown and landing, as I promised everyone. But still, everybody's safe and sound, and the plane will start to decelerate here and come to a complete stop. So there you have it. We've got an aborted landing, a go-around, a little bit of sporty flight sim piloting by admittedly a bad flight sim pilot, and a hard landing. All those things happened, but we were safe. The plane was able to, totally capable of withstanding it, and we got a little bit of experience under our belts. Thank you very much for watching another installment in my video series all about how I'm trying to conquer my fear of flying through virtual reality and flight simulators, and I really appreciate you guys watching my videos thus far. Remember, if you like my content, please hit those like and subscribe buttons below the video, and feel free to let me know any thoughts you have in the comments. All right, thanks a lot. Until next time.